Film theorist Béla Balázs spoke of micro-physiognomy, which is the idea that the camera uncovers the inner feeling of a subject through a close-up. And in traditional cinema, the close-up is the ultimate empathetic tool, signaling to our biology that the person on screen is our protagonist. But when Hollywood casts Zac Efron as Ted Bundy or Evan Peters as Jeffrey Dahmer, it becomes an aesthetic hijack, which triggers the halo effect, which is a psychological bias where our positive impressions of an actor's physical attractiveness bleed directly into our moral evaluation of the killer they portray. And a good example of this is when viewers sexualized Evan Peters' portrayal of Dahmer despite the depravity on screen, just as they did with Bundy's televised trial to show this is not just a movie problem, it's also a psychological problem. In both cases, the halo effect turned a courtroom into a stage and a killer into a leading man. But in cinema, by granting the monster a hero's framing, the director forces a biological response of empathy before the brain can process the sheer scale of the crimes. Even the editing weaponizes the Kuleshov effect to make the audience read humanity into the killer. Hollywood rarely portrays the monster as he was. Instead, they portray our dangerous desire for the monster to be special and unique. And if the glamorous monster is a cinematic fiction, the attempt to humanize them through domesticity or relatability is an even more insidious trap. For example, Jonathan Glazer's The Zone of Interest operates as the absolute antithesis of the Hollywood monster. It portrays Rudolf Höss as the commandant of Auschwitz, a tedious patriarch obsessing over his garden and his career promotion. This aligns perfectly with philosopher Hannah Arendt's Banality of Evil, the terrifying reality that history's greatest atrocities were committed not by theatrical sociopaths but by terrifyingly normal bureaucrats simply executing their daily jobs. Hollywood usually fails at this because it insists on making monsters extraordinary. When a traditional film shows a killer eating breakfast, it uses that routine to bridge the gap between the viewer and the atrocity, begging for an unearned relatability. But Glazer uses relatable routine to alienate us, proving that the true horror lies in its absolute ordinariness. How then does cinema ethically depict the unfilmable scale of slaughter? Let's look away from Hollywood for a second and toward Rithy Pann's documentary, The Missing Picture. A survivor of the Cambodian genocide, Panh faced a unique cinematic problem. The Khmer Rouge systematically destroyed almost all visual evidence of their crimes. But instead of casting actors to reenact the trauma, he used hand-carved clay figurines to recreate the massacres. This method acknowledges that the monster's reality is fundamentally unfilmable. By utilizing clay, he prevents the viewer from consuming the pain of real victims as a visceral thrill. He enforces a necessary emotional distance. But compare this with Hotel Rwanda or Schindler's List, which rely heavily on the one good man trope. These films provide the audience with a psychological exit ramp. They allow us to walk out of the theater feeling uplifted because a few individuals were saved, functionally erasing the millions who perished from our immediate conscience. When filmmakers reject that exit ramp and instead confront atrocity directly, they walk a razor-thin line between historical record and sheer exploitation. Consider Men Behind the Sun, a very controversial 1988 film depicting the human experimentation conducted by Japan's Unit 731. The film utilizes real autopsy footage violently mixed with horrific practical effects. This creates a profound ethical friction. Does depicting an atrocity in high definition and explicit detail honor the victims by refusing to look away, or does it turn their agonizing deaths into an endurance spectacle? When the camera lingers too long on broken bodies, it stops being a tool for empathy and becomes a dark mirror reflecting the audience's own curiosities. And the final mechanism of this distortion is structural. Hollywood is utterly enslaved to the three-act structure, a framework that demands escalating conflict, inevitability, and resolution. But history possesses no such narrative tidiness. It is driven by complex systems and structural failures, not the great man theory of individual villains and heroes that cinema adores. When filmmakers force the Holocaust or the Cambodian genocide into a 120-minute script with an overarching hero's journey, they violently impose logic upon absolute madness. This manufactured logic is the ultimate empathy trap. It sanitizes the trauma by offering a beginning, middle, and end, tricking the viewer into feeling that a catastrophic event somehow makes sense within the grand tapestry of human existence. We do not consume monster movies to genuinely understand evil, nor to pay adequate tribute to the fallen. We watch them to feel fundamentally superior to it. We use the monster's manufactured humanity as a distorted measuring stick for our own morality. By staring into the sanitized abyss and walking away unchanged, we passionately assure ourselves of our own goodness, utterly blind to the fact that the cinematic monster was built precisely to keep us comfortable in the dark.